Welcome back, everyone. Now, this is day 6 of my Israel trip. If you haven't seen days 1 through 5, you gotta go see those first. But let's get started with day 6. Well, this morning we were off to Mount Tabor. It rises 1,600 feet above the surrounding plain and 1,900 feet above sea level. It was central in the Battle of Deborah and Barak over the Canaanite army of Sisera. It is also the location of the transfiguration of Jesus. About 8 days after Jesus said this, he took Peter, John, and James with him and went up onto a mountain to pray. As he was praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became as bright as a flash of lightning. 2 men, Moses and Elijah, appeared in glorious splendor, talking with Jesus. They spoke about his departure, which he was about to bring to fulfillment at Jerusalem. Peter and his companions were very sleepy, but when they became fully awake, they saw his glory and the 2 men standing with him. As the men were leaving Jesus, Peter said to him, "Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While he was speaking, a cloud appeared and covered them, and they were afraid as they entered the cloud. A voice came from the cloud saying, "This is my son, whom I have chosen. Listen to him." When the voice had spoken, they found that Jesus was alone. The disciples kept this to themselves and did not tell anyone that at that time what they had seen. Now, the bus and most other vehicles can only go so far up the mountain because the road becomes a small zigzagging road that something like a bus could not navigate. So we had to stop halfway up and wait for the little shuttle buses to take us up and down. This is us heading up in the shuttle, and there's Mount Precipice. Doyle and Jean told us that the shuttle drivers get a kick out of taking these turns fast to give the tourists a bit of a scare. It didn't really feel that scary. Yeah, they were taking the turns a bit fast, but you can tell they knew the roads well and were good drivers. And look at that, we made it to the top. This is the Church of Transfiguration, built by the Franciscans in 1924. This was one of the churches where you had to talk in a very soft whisper or not at all, so there were no tour explanations allowed. Now, it would have been fine for Doyle to talk to the group because we had these headsets. He couldn't talk very quietly. He could have talked very quietly into the mic and we would have had no trouble hearing him. I think the problem was that he had gotten so much into the habit of talking loudly so we could all hear him that what he thought was his quiet voice wasn't all that quiet. A monk came over and shushed him and pulled him over to talk to him or something. Next thing we know, we hear over our headsets, "So I got kicked out because I was talking, but if you go over to your left..." I look back and Doyle's standing outside the doors gesturing around the church while he told us about it. Anyway, this is the main chapel, the Jesus Chapel. On one side of the church was the Moses Chapel. And on the other side was the Elijah Chapel, to observe the appearance of Moses and Elijah during the Transfiguration. You'll notice that Doyle snuck his way back inside. On the grounds around the church were all sorts of structures and excavations and gardens. There are the remains of a fortress wall built in the 13th century by the Muslims. There are remains of 3 Byzantine churches for Jesus, Moses, and Elijah built in the 6th century, and a 12th century Crusader church. Due to the quiet observed inside the chapel, we had our teaching moment outside. Our next stop was Harod Spring. Now that's Harod spelled H-A-R-O-D, not like King Herod. The Harod Spring comes out of Gideon's cave. This is the site where God separated the men of Gideon's army for battle. Early in the morning, Jerubbaal, this is Gideon, and all his men camped at the spring of Harod. The camp of Midian was north of them in the valley near the hill of Moreh. The Lord said to Gideon, "You have too many men. I cannot deliver Midian into their hands, or Israel would boast against me. My own strength has saved me." Now announce to the army, anyone who trembles with fear may turn back and leave Mount Gilead. So 22,000 men left, while 10,000 remained. But the Lord said to Gideon, "There are still too many men. Take them down to the water, and I will thin them out for you there. If I say this one shall go with you, he shall go. But if I say this one shall not go with you, he shall not go." So Gideon took the men down to the water. There the Lord told him, "Separate those who lap the water with their tongues as a dog laps from those who kneel down to drink it." 300 of them drank from cupped hands, lapping like dogs. All the rest got down on their knees to drink. The Lord said to Gideon, "With the 300 men that lapped, I will save you and give the Midianites into your hands. Let all the others go home." This here is Gideon's cave. It is at the base of Mount Gilboa, which is where King Saul died. And this is Harod Spring. And there's Freddie demonstrating the incorrect and correct way to drink the water. I was so disappointed I didn't take a creek walking photo at Dan yesterday with my dad, but I got one today. And our next bathroom story. I'd had to use the bathroom since we arrived, but on our way out we discovered the bathrooms were out of order. They offered to stop somewhere, but I didn't want a repeat of the other night. And our next stop wasn't too far, so I figured I could wait. Barely. We then left for our next stop, Bet Shan. And on the way we passed by Mount Gilboa. Now the Philistines fought against Israel. The Israelites fled before them, and many fell dead on Mount Gilboa. The Philistines were in hot pursuit of Saul and his sons, and they killed his sons Jonathan, Abinadab, and Malchishua. The fighting grew fierce around Saul, and when the archers overtook him, they wounded him critically. Saul said to his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword and run me through, or these uncircumcised fellows will come and run me through and abuse me." But this armor-bearer was terrified and would not do it, so Saul took his own sword and fell on it. Bet Shan was probably the largest excavation in all of Israel. I don't know, it could have been, but we didn't go to all of Israel, so it was definitely the largest excavation we went to on our trip. Following the Israelite occupation of the Promised Land, Bet Shan and the surrounding towns were assigned to the tribe of Manasseh, but they feared the Canaanites, who defended themselves with iron chariots. Therefore, they failed to drive them out of Bet Shan. The Israelites finally conquered the city during the reign of King Solomon, and he used the city as an administrative center and was later destroyed. The Greeks built the city at the foot of the ancient Tell in 250 BC and named it Scythopolis. During Roman rule, it became the capital city of Decapolis. The grand city was destroyed by an earthquake in 749 AD. Sanaa's chef of the family was bringing us lunch again, so while they were setting up, we all went to check out the amphitheater. They made sure to tell us that after lunch we were free to roam the excavation with only 2 rules. 1, you are to be back at the entrance by a certain time. 2, you do not go anywhere alone. You must have at least 2 people in a group. This was because they used to let you roam by yourself if you wanted, but one guy apparently didn't hydrate himself enough, and he walked up the hill to check out the Tell. He got dehydrated and too hot and got disoriented. Apparently he decided to come back down and then ended up wandering, no joke, almost 6 miles before a local found him and was able to contact the group leaders. Yeah, no one goes anywhere by themselves anymore.
Diana, you need a singer.
Yes.
Diana and Lou, go down and
No.
sing for us.
Yeah. There's stairs on that side. Woo, woo.
Okay.
You see the front row with the raised backs? Those seats were reserved for the higher paying patrons, people who were important or nobility of some kind. Naturally, Dad feels those seats are for him. Woohoo! Lunchtime! And yes, there were cats. This is Palladia Street. The 150-meter-long colonnaded street crossed the city from the slopes of the Tell to the theater. Originally built during the Roman period, this street was renovated at the beginning of the Byzantine period. On its northwest side is a covered portico that opens onto a row of shops, whose facade was faced with marble. A dedicatory inscription from the 4th century CE found in the portico mosaic recounts the construction of the portico in the days of Palladius, governor of the province. Thus the road came to be called Palladia Street by excavators. On the opposite side of the street, a 2-story row of shops was erected on an ancient foundation from the Roman period. This is the Byzantine Agora. It's a concourse surrounded by porticos at the center of the city built in the Byzantine period, which served as a commercial center. And there's Dave pretending to be Samson. And Jackie. Dad never could resist these face cutout figures. This is the Tell, or the Upper City. Yeah, I can see how that guy got disoriented. Trust me, it was a long staircase. Look at how big this place is. We didn't even have time to go look at everything. I gotta check out other stuff next time I go. Here's a lizard. You see him? Here. There he is. That hilly region out there is the country of Jordan. That pile of stones and bricks is one end of the fallen truncated bridge built by the Romans. This is Sylvanus Street. Originally, the street was a Roman road flanked on one side by a monumental colonnade. A marble riveted pool was built parallel to the road. During the Byzantine period, this Roman road was overlaid by a new street, and a new hall was erected on top of the pool, its ceiling supported by the colonnade. This street was named Sylvanus Street by the excavators after a lawyer named Sylvanus, mentioned in inscriptions as having been involved in the hall's construction. In the early Muslim period, this hall fell into disuse and was replaced by stores fronted by a portico of columns and arches. The earthquake of 749 AD leveled columns and structures along the street. A segment of the store's facade has been restored and reconstructed, but the portico's arches still lie in the heap of ruins. This is the Nymphaeum. You see that flat part at the back of the semicircle? There it is. This is a public fountain of the 2nd century AD, remodeled in the 4th century. Water spilled into a pool situated in front of the structure on the side facing the street. These columns are sitting where they fell during the 749 AD earthquake. This is the city where King Saul's body was impaled on the wall of the temple. The next day, when the Philistines came to strip the dead, they found Saul and his 3 sons fallen on Mount Gilboa. They cut off his head and stripped off his armor, and they sent messengers throughout the land of the Philistines to proclaim the news in the temple of their idols and among their people. They put his armor in the temple of the Ashtoreths and fastened his body to the wall of Beth-Shan. I had followed the map on the brochure and found the temple. Or so I thought. I don't know how I read that map so wrong, but this is not the temple. But I was close. If I had just turned around 180 degrees, I would have been facing the temple. There's the Nymphaeum, and that big column on the right, the temple is basically behind that just off camera. That's where Saul's body was supposedly hung. And I'm sorry for all the people that I met along the way thinking I had found the temple and was pointing you guys in the wrong direction. I'm sorry. Jackie and I decided to check out the West Bathhouse. Luckily, I was able to correctly, this time, decipher where we were on the map. This Byzantine bathhouse, covered by 2.2 acres, contains hot and tepid bathing halls with a heating system. Its walls were coated with colored plaster, and its floors were paved with marble slabs and mosaics. This would be an example of the hot, tepid, and cold rooms. These little pillars hold up the floor, and under the floor is where they put the hot, warm, or cold water to create the temperature of the room they wanted. And here is a lone toilet. But here is the lavatory. The toilets would line the walls, and in the center would be musicians or something to entertain everyone. I'm a musician, and I can tell you I would not have wanted this job. I mean, a bathroom could get smelly enough as it is, and that's with modern plumbing. I can't imagine what this would have been like when you couldn't flush the stuff away. Not to mention, how awkward would that be? To be sitting there as people use the bathroom. I mean, I'm sure they're used to it at that time. This day and age, we've been, private about that stuff for decades, centuries. I can't imagine how awkward that would have been. We went back to the entrance area. We bought snacks and souvenirs. Although now that I'm looking at it, I think these gals are at Nazareth Village, not Bet Shan. Oh well. I bought a camel for my baby nephew. We then headed over to Megiddo as our final stop of the day. However, when we got there, they wouldn't let us go up because they didn't believe we could get through the site before they closed. So we would have to come back the next morning on our free day and do that. What kind of schedule do we have? Flexible! I realized I had taken all these pictures of ancient Nazareth, but had almost no photos of modern day Nazareth. So here you go. This is the falafel shop from our first day in Nazareth. And this restaurant used to be a Byzantine church. Nazareth kind of reminded me of downtown St. Louis. Half of it is nice and well kept, but the other half is a little run down. This was a spice shop we stopped at. I bought some falafel spice and some pizza spice. The pizza spice is still in my pantry. It works pretty well when I make my own pizzas. And that's the end of day 6 in Israel. Now go check out day 7.